Hi Olivia, it's Fancy, and I'm looking at your design and comparing it to what you said in the post. And so you decided to work with gradation. You started by zigzagging double visual pathways, but you felt it was blending together, so you also added stronger single visual pathways that you wove through everything. And you said that the beginning pathways are pretty easy, and that's true, but it's harder to know how to fill in the gaps without achieving overallness. All right, so when I'm looking at this, I may not be pointing out the paths exactly as you intended them. So I apologize for that. That's just kind of a limitation of this kind of course setup. Um, so I see this, strong double visual pathway. It's not really gradating, but it spans a short distance, so it's not really gradating. And then I see this other one that seems to cross over it, perhaps, and then it goes under this short single visual pathway because we see some similarity and continuation that on either side of this light pathway. But what I'm confused about is whether this pathway goes over this or this pathway goes over this one, because these are all, very similar in value. It could go either way. So what needs to happen here is that these values have to shift or to change. Either this whole pathway has to go lighter, so this pathway appears to go underneath and pick back up here, or you can just lighten these values here on either side of this pathway to make it kind of rise above and be on top of this one. So this is kind of the critical area for this part. Then I see another double visual pathway, and for me it seems to kind of go underneath all of these other pathways going in the other direction and maybe pick up somewhere in here, because again we're looking at the similarity of values and continuation, so it kind of continues because they share a common edge. But that would be too far to make a visual pathway span, and that's too hard of a long of a connection for the viewer to make. Maybe this visual pathway continues here, or it continues here. So again, or maybe this is a visual pathway. I think this is what you intended. Actually, this is looking pretty good. If you kind of squint your eyes and look at your design and look in the darker areas, the different values really go well together. They blend well together. But as you move into kind of the middle grays and the lighter areas, well, the lighter areas like in this area are fine. But especially in the middle grays, there's too many high contrast values placed next to each other. Look at this white mixed in there. So you're not getting so this is a nice gradation right here, stretching, and then about here you start to introduce areas of higher contrast next to each other. These are low contrast. These are higher contrast, and so it breaks up the gradation, and that's what creates the overallness. So this looks like it's moving darker nicely into the dark middle grays, into middle grays, and then light middle grays. So that light middle grays are where you're running into trouble here. And then it looks like it starts to reverse back again, but look at this high value, this value next to this. There's lots of steps in between. This might be, say, step 3 in your scale, and this might be step, I don't know, 7 in your scale, and that's too far of a distance if you're trying to create gradation. So I think that's where your main issue is that you're trying to you have too many values that are placed next to each other that have that are far apart on the scale. So let's take a look at some of your single visual pathways. So, this is good. You just need to kind of, again, look at these high value contrasts. And make sure that where pathways are crossing over each other, that on either side of the pathway you have similar values like you do here. This very distinctly goes underneath this pathway. And this one could, if you had, see, look how these values are shared in the single value pathway. So, this value here is right here. So it's in the single visual pathway, it's in the double visual pathway right next to it. So you need these lighter values here on either side. And that might mean you have to kind of adjust where your gradation is. I'm going to cut the video off here and continue just so the videos don't get too long and I can't post them easily. All right, so this is part one.